Hey there. Good morning. So I am going to get started. It is 11:30, so it's time to get going. I want to be respectful of your time, of course. Um, so if you did not catch uh, last webinar that we had, which was in this series, which was the first team's webinar, then Keely can have that. She can put that in the chat so you have the quick link. We sent it out in an email after the fact, but I wanted to make sure that you guys were able to see that. So let's get going and let's talk about how you kind of manage your remote workers and what you do as far as if you're remote workers, some of the tips that you can do or some of the tips that you can use uh, using Teams and the applications that kind of surround it. This webinar as well is recorded, so we will, just like the other one, we will send it out a couple days after I get done editing it and make sure that I clip off the end pieces and such. Um, so this is the agenda. So I'll tell you very quickly who ComTech is if you don't already know from the first webinar, but we'll talk about how times are changing per the picture you see there in the background. You can see that times are a little bit different, especially if you've been paying attention at all to the news recently. Even in the last week since we had our last webinar, things have gotten kind of even more crazy, let's say. So then I'll give you some actionable tips to utilize Teams in support of your remote workers. So exactly, tell you a couple small stories and such of how we're seeing Teams used and how we utilize it ourselves. Then, of course, we'll do just a quick question and answer so you guys have your opportunity to ask any questions. So if you have any questions that come to mind throughout this whole piece, definitely put them in the chat. Keely, if she feels like they need to be answered right then per that slide, she can let me know, or she'll kind of hold them all to the end and give them to me at the end. I would be beaten pretty badly if I didn't mention the Tesla up in the top right hand corner by our marketing and sales team. So we'll talk about that as well. We truly are giving away a Tesla. You guys probably have heard about it. If you haven't, then please stick around because it'll be a nice Christmas gift if you end up winning it. So ComTech, I'm not going to talk too much about us, primarily because you didn't come to this webinar to listen to me talk about ComTech. You came to listen to me talk about Teams. The point of this slide is just to tell you we're not a new kid on the block. We've been here for quite some time, since 1990. And we kind of span across our skill set goes across many different industries, which we think is a serious advantage because that allows us to look at CPAs, lawyers, local government, nonprofit, and what is working for one industry. We look at possibly applying it in other industries. As you'll see some of these slides, I talk about kind of different industries and how they're using things. So this slide was actually on, I believe, the first webinar, but I thought it was good enough that I wanted to put it back in here because it kind of sums things up per the picture that was on the slide for the agenda. You saw that more employees are working from home. We all know that. But that is kind of per the second point there, that is disrupting the routine. We all have routines. We all get up about the same time every morning. We eat breakfast, we take a shower, whatever it may be. That's our routine. Well, with this COVID stuff, this has really thrown us all off. To give you a good example of this, I've spoken with a number of our clients as well as employees, and they talk about their kids and how a lot of them used to be straight A students and do great in school. And now they're really struggling. They're really having problems with their grades and just kind of, for lack of better terms, quite sad, just because the routine is messed up and they aren't able to see their friends, that sort of thing. Well, as silly as it sounds to compare that to what we're going through as far as adults and workers, it's the same type of thing, I do believe. As far as it's amazing, you get out of your routine of not seeing your colleagues, not seeing them at the water cooler or at the coffee machine, that sort of thing. It just throws you kind of out of whack. So this software, Teams, can help with that. And then, of course, the feeling isolated from lack of contact that goes along with everything that I'm saying. As far as it's hard to stay connected as a team when you don't physically see each other. If you maybe you only talk on the phone or whatever it may be, especially if you're not talking on the phone and you're only emailing, then it's even more difficult to try to stay cohesive as a unit. So this slide, same thing. It was on the previous webinar, but this just goes to show you that there are a tremendous increase in this platform as far as how many users and how many people are using the meeting functionality. And I'll actually show you a screenshot that I took this morning of ours from the last 7 days here in just a moment. So, first actionable piece, which this is obvious if you know anything about Microsoft Teams. This is going to be the meetings and chat functionality inside of the piece of software. That is kind of its bread and butter. I mean, that's what it's known for as far as just regular chatting. That is kind of the base, but there's so many things we can add on top of that. As you'll see here, number one, holding a brainstorming session there in the middle. That is the kind of things that I know for a fact you guys were doing every single day, every day when everybody's at the office. Again, you're going to the coffee machine and you're talking because you hear other people outside your office. You walk out there and you get to talking and you get to talking about, hey, I have this issue with this client. Has anyone ever seen this? That type of thing. If everybody's remote, it becomes much more difficult to have those kind of one-off, ad hoc type, um, just random conversations. It becomes very difficult. So Teams can definitely help with that, as well as deliver a training workshop. I believe I mentioned this in my first webinar, which is when I train our employees on any new piece of software. We actually have a new piece of encryption, email encryption software that we're working on with an outside vendor. And I know I need to do a training on that this afternoon. My team doesn't know about it yet, but this afternoon I am going to send a message out in Teams saying whoever is available at this time, please jump on. If you can't jump on, don't worry. I'm going to record it. The recording will be right here in the team chat, and you guys can watch it on your own time. Please do me a favor and chat in here and tell me when you watched it. That way I can make sure everybody actually watched it and looked over the recording. So delivering those training workshops, that's a big thing. Calling, if you can't email, how many times do all of us were emailing back and forth with our clients, and we email back and forth a couple times, and then finally somebody says, "Can you just call me?" It's so much simpler to get the point across with calling. Well, if you can't video, which I recommend, if you can't have a meeting in that sense, then I recommend the next best step, which is calling. Microsoft Teams does that quite well. As far as especially internally, it does it phenomenally. Internally, it's all included, as well as the video portion, as I mentioned. Um, Externally, though, so let's say you're using your Teams platform and you want to call me if you're outside of the organization. You can do it if you have the right license. Now, I can tell you ComTech is back in the R&D stage with Microsoft. Looking back at this, Microsoft has really done a lot of work on their back-end phone system piece. We looked at this about 6 or 8 months ago, and it didn't make sense. We didn't feel for the majority of our clients. You couldn't do an auto attendant. You couldn't have special routing as far as ring groups and such. It was lacking a lot of the functionality that our current phone system has, as well as the current functionality that our clients ask for, which are ring groups, auto attendance, mobile app, all those types of things. So we are back. We're going to look back at that, but just letting you guys know we are looking at that. But you can do it. It's just I don't personally think it's ready for prime time. Internal calls, it works great. It works very, very well. But external, I don't think it's ready quite yet. Now, collaboration, to use a buzzword here in the industry. So inside, it works very, very well. When you start bringing in outside vendors, you can do it. I've seen many companies do it. You end up with some limitations on who has licenses and such. So just be aware of that. We can definitely help with that conversation. But a couple of things I wanted to highlight here is right there in the middle, it's the co-author files. So this has been around for quite some time. I know Google does it quite well with the Google Docs, but you can have a file in Teams where it's in Word or Excel, whatever it may be, and you have 2 or 3 people working on it. You can actually work on it at the same time. That's a big selling point for Microsoft and Google. Personally, I don't work with my team as far as like, hey, let's go work on this document together at the same time. We just don't do that. But what we do is in the past, we would email a document and say, hey, can you edit this? And then they would send it back, and that's revision 2. And then I would create revision 3, and it would go back and forth. So there is a better way, or what I think is a better way, which is drop it in Teams and then make your edits. When that person opens it up, there's actually a catch. It's called catch up or something along those lines, where that person can click the button and it'll show them all of the edits that I made. So they can kind of be caught up on what the latest revision is and who made those changes, which is super handy. That way they don't have to search back in there going, this looks like the same document and somebody only changed some punctuation or whatever it may be. Another piece is, and I cannot stress this enough, the team aspect, as far as having the teams in there and having your remote workers be in whatever team they're in at work, whether they're in the purchasing team or they're in the project development team, whatever it may be, or the accounting team, whatever it is, there is a real value in keeping those teams in there and having that communication going. So let me give you an example. This is the last 7 days, and again, I pulled these numbers this morning. The last 7 days of Teams activity for CommTech. Now, you can see I blanked out kind of all the other users, but you can see that in the middle here, let me grab my laser pointer. Here, you can see that chat messages, one user has almost 1,500 chat messages in 1 week. And then you've got close to 1,000, and you've got a number here. I'm down at the bottom. I have about 1,300. You can see that one-on-one calls. I told you I do a lot of calls. I do a lot of video calls as far as, and regular calls. Most of the time it's video. But in 1 week, I did 327. I'm not 100% sure how I got that many in. I'm sure it was just it was lots and lots of activity. And I'm not saying that's the most productive because I'm probably not the most productive on that. But the point is, and you see 37 total meetings, the point is that communication, probably some of it certainly would have happened if we didn't have Teams, because we would have certainly picked up the phone. We would have, we would have sent an email, that kind of thing. But I don't think that it would happen to this level. And that could, just across the board, if you've got to ask a very, very quick question, that's what the majority of these are. I've got to ask a very quick question. Hey, where's that document on this? that sort of thing. Instead of the user picking up the phone, they just simply put it in a chat message, and I can chat back very quickly. So we obviously use that quite a bit. Tip number 4, employee updates. If your organization is set up for it, you can set up tabs inside of certain teams that will go directly to SharePoint or will go directly to some other website, something like that. That allows you, if you're a larger organization, you can put your updates in one place on that website or whatever it is. And inside of the team, the employee can just click that tab and then they will see all of the company updates. So that's pretty handy. Now, let's shift gears just a little bit in the sense this is still talking about Teams, but it's also bringing in some of the other Office 365 applications, because that's one of the things that Microsoft was very adamant about with Teams compared to Skype for Business. Skype for Business is what was before, but it did not integrate very well into Word, SharePoint, OneDrive, those types of applications. It really didn't integrate. With Teams, it does because it's kind of one big ecosystem. So number 5, apps everywhere. Not everyone knows this, but based upon your licensing in 365, you have the ability to install Office on up to 5 PCs or 5 tablets or 5 phones, 5 iPads, that kind of thing. So you have the ability to install the same Office application that you have at work. You can install it at home. Now, again, where is that beneficial? It's tremendously beneficial when you have a user that goes home and they pull out their older laptop that has a 10-year-old version of Office on it. Maybe it doesn't even have Outlook on it. And even if it does, it looks completely different. So again, we're throwing that employee off of their routine. So we want to keep everything as consistent as possible. So you can definitely just simply install Office on that machine. If you're a manager on this call, then don't worry if that employee happens to leave the organization. You can simply deactivate that Office and it deactivates it on that machine. And I'll also put in here access to your files with that 1 terabyte of storage. We'll talk about that in just a second. Using search and then using the where you left off feature. So right now, I could not tell you pretty much where anything, just about where any documents are stored for our company as far as the folder structure goes. I don't know where anything's stored. I also don't really know. I've got a general idea of where documents are stored in my own personal OneDrive. The reason why I don't know is because I use the search feature so much. Microsoft has done quite a good job on going, when you go to Windows 10, down in the bottom left, the start menu, you can click in there and you can just start typing, and it will search based upon how you have it set up. It'll search your OneDrive, which are all your personal files. It'll search your SharePoint, which is all your company files, if you have that set up. So it allows you to, instead of searching through tons of company files, maybe on map drives or whatever they are, to try to find this certain document, you can just simply type in a couple keywords and it'll shoot you right over there to it, which is super, super nice. Another thing is if you're like me, a lot of times I'm prepping for one of these webinars. I've got a PowerPoint open or I've got a Word document open, and I'm going to town, I'm focused, and then a Teams message comes in, and then a phone call comes in, and then I have to run to another room and do something. I come back and I've already closed out of the application, or I go home or I go to the office and I open up PowerPoint and I say, I want to start where I kind of left off. Well, when you open it, you can click a button there to start where you left off. It takes you back directly to wherever your cursor was at that time when you stopped. So that is super handy because then you can go right back and try your best to get back focused where you were and just begin work. You don't have to sort down or scroll down through the PowerPoint or whatever it is to try to find where you left off. Using OneDrive is number 7. This is the part where I was talking about the 1 terabyte. So again, based upon your license for Office 365, you get up to 1 terabyte per user that you're allowed to use for storage. That is super handy because that means you can stop storing things on your local hard drive. Because if you're storing things on your local desktop, your local documents, you're just waiting for the hard drive to crash and for it to end badly. Unless you have a backup, then that's a whole different story. But I recommend using OneDrive. It also allows you to, I can use OneDrive here at my desktop. I can pick up my laptop, go to the office, I open it up. It's the exact same. All of my files are the exact same. I'm not moving anything around on a flash drive. I'm not emailing things to myself. It's super, super handy. The other piece is you can use the OneDrive app, which you're actually seeing here. So there actually is a OneDrive application you can install on your local desktop, and it will sync those OneDrive files over to your desktop. So if you're like me, kind of old fashioned, I would like to use File Explorer. I don't want to go out to a website and then have to download every file that I want to access. I want it all to be inside a File Explorer. Well, you can certainly do that, and that's free. The OneDrive app is free. I do like to put one small disclaimer here, which is if you have ever used the OneDrive app, if you used it about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, then I highly urge you to try it again. That's always what I get when I do these webinars and I mention it. Somebody says, hey, I used the OneDrive app about 2 years ago and it was absolutely horrible. It didn't work. It had all kinds of problems. And you would be correct. Back in the day, 2 years ago or so, it did have problems, but they have now fixed that. And all of our employees across the board, we all use it, and we don't store anything, pretty much anything locally. If anyone out there on my team is storing things locally, then they know that it's not important. Because there's a good chance that it's not going to be there because the hard drive will crash at some point. So they should be storing all their items in OneDrive. But all of our teams are using it, and it works quite well. Number 8, and this is the last point I kind of have for your remote workers, is using the mobile apps. A lot of times when users first want their email set up on their phone, if they're an Apple user, they'll try to set it up in Apple Mail. If they're a Android user, I believe the application is Gmail. It's the Gmail app, but it's the default app. Instead of that, I highly recommend using the Outlook application. I know it's one more app on your phone, but it comes with increased functionality. So it's very similar to the desktop app as far as functionality goes. You can set yourself an autoresponder. You can do lots of neat things that are very quick and intuitive. As well as it's just good practice to keep your work separate from your personal, just for a mental stability sake. So you can have your Apple Mail app, have your personal, your iCloud account or whatever it is, and then you can have your Outlook for just your work stuff. The other thing is you see on the right-hand side, you'll see the Office application. So that I personally have not used as much. I'm starting to use it a little bit more, but you can see the little demo there that it's going through. It allows you to get into Excel and Word and PowerPoint all inside of one application. And you can actually see where it's scrolling there. It's looking at items that you have recently touched. So if you pull out your Office app, whether you touched an Excel file, a Word file, a PowerPoint, you're able to quickly see what you are working on, click it, and then click take me to where I left off. So hopefully that was beneficial. Hopefully out of those 8 tips or so, you were able to grab 1 or 2 items. If you haven't heard about the Tesla giveaway, please go out to comtechnc.com/Tesla. We're getting close to a month away. It's a little over a month away before we give somebody a very, very nice Christmas gift. Now, let's go to questions. Keely, are there any questions so far?
There were a couple that I have sent to you in a direct message, Ethan.
Okay, awesome. Give me just a second. Let me pull that up. Okay. So number 1, do we have any tips for having a team social type meeting or tips to make sure team stays together and talking? So I've seen a few clients that have tried this whole kind of social happy hour thing on Friday, 4 o'clock, something like that. And I'm all for it. You end up with a little bit of a struggle. It's definitely not the same. And the reason why it's not the same is because when you're having a true social, you have multiple people in the same room and everybody's kind of talking to everybody. When you do a social like what I'm talking about hosted, you end up with only 1 or 2 people really being able to talk at a time, because if everybody talked, nobody would be able to hear anything. So you end up with that kind of issue. I do recommend, as far as making sure the team stays together and talking, I do recommend having those weekly kind of meetings for the team. And even if you're a small team, that's fine. Just having a simple weekly meeting. Another thing that we've seen that has worked quite well in this kind of environment, it actually has helped a lot of people, is we have started trying to get some of our team members to do small trainings. I told you earlier about trainings in general and how I do them. But if you have anybody on your team that is very smart in any certain area, they really know this side of the business or whatever it is, it isn't always that people love talking in front of a whole bunch of people. This is perfect. They can do a team meeting and they can host something and they can train someone, and they don't have to turn on their camera. If they really feel uncomfortable, they don't have to turn on their camera. But it allows your team to hear somebody else speak besides the manager. So that training piece is quite good. You mentioned so many meetings and calls. Do you always choose video or call for every question? So and I thought that might come up when I put the slide in there that said, that showed you our numbers, because it looks like I'm doing nothing but having meetings all day, which is halfway true. But I don't do it for everyone. I do it for a number of them, but the majority of the chats and such are, did you call so and so? And I wouldn't really pick up the phone and say, hey, did you call them? That doesn't make sense. But those very quick chats is that. But a lot of them do end up in video and calls, because I say, hey, did you call them? And they reply back, no. Well, instead of typing quite a bit, I normally just press the video button and say, okay, let's talk about it. Why didn't you call them? Did I, maybe I wasn't clear, that kind of thing. So I see 2 more. We've got 1 more minute. So how do I know which license I have for Office 365? Or does it include Teams and Office, as I mentioned? That is not as simple, depending on if you're an employee or an owner or an administrator on your Office 365. The easiest way I would recommend is shoot an email to support@comtechnc.com, and we'll be more than happy to glance at it. If you're not the administrator, we'll be more than happy to talk to the administrator and say, hey, this is the license that you need for your users to be able to install Office and that kind of thing. And then the final one is OneDrive Personal the same as what I've mentioned? So Microsoft does have and that's a very good question. Microsoft does have a personal version of OneDrive. It's again very similar to kind of Google Drive. It gives you, I believe, 5 gigabytes of storage for free, and then you can start paying. So it is different in the sense of it's a different offering as far as price and that kind of thing, but it is the same on the back end. It's all very, very similar. Uses the same OneDrive application on your desktop. So it's very, very similar, and you can have both. I actually have both. I have a personal OneDrive, and then I have a business OneDrive. Well, that was all the questions that I see. Keely, do you see any other questions that may have came in while I was chatting?
I do not.
Okay. Well, if not, I'll hang out here just for a second. And we look forward to seeing everybody next week, hopefully, in our third webinar of the series. And that one will be uncovering kind of hidden features inside of Teams. So again, we're trying to pull more and more productivity and use out of the Teams application. But we look forward to seeing everybody next week. Have a great week.